Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Head to Total, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on all things medical. I feel like it's been a hot second since this guest has been on with us. It's Andy Cox. How are you, Andy Cox, physician associate with Mendelsohn Kornblum and Synergy Health Partners Orthopedic Urgent Care? How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good, A little bit of snow today here in Michigan.
We need more of it.
Yeah, I'm not a snow person. Although I don't like extreme heat, but you do winter sports, so I'm not as cool as you.
I do. I like the hockey, and I just got some snowshoes. I haven't been able to use them this year.
Yeah, well, there you go. Today could be your day. There was like 6 inches the other day. You didn't go out and play in the snow?
I was working here until 8 o'clock, and then it all melted.
Yes, because for those of you that don't know, when in Michigan, it could be, 32 degrees at noon, but then by 5, it's 60. So, yeah, that happens. I also heard there's some background noise. You got kids playing in the background. You're still at work at the Sportsplex, the Greg Grant Sportsplex. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Absolutely, yeah. And the gym is right on the other side of this wall here to my left, and we get to hear them playing all day. It's actually kind of cool, but it can get a little noisy sometimes.
Yeah, well, if they play pickup ball and you have to go, well, me and the audience will understand,
All right.
But listen, I wanted to bring you back on because, frankly, you're very knowledgeable in all things about orthopedics. But I understand that you've had some additional training, and it's coming around to spring sports. I wanted to talk to you about concussions. And I think, it's a hot topic. I think there's a lot of questions that people have. And frankly, if we could just jump right in, what really is a concussion? What happens in your noggin when you get knocked around like that?
Sure. So a concussion is a head injury. It usually happens when you take a blow to the head, or even if you have a sudden jarring kind of an injury where your brain sort of rattles around inside your skull, and it doesn't cause any bleeding or swelling or anything like that, but it causes your brain to not function as well for a while.
When you're saying not functioned for a while, Andy, is it just like a general fog? Is it dizziness? What are some of the symptoms that we should all be on the lookout for?
So those are two very common symptoms. People feel general fogginess, or they're just not thinking clearly, but it can cause other things like dizziness, headaches, and lots of other subtle symptoms. Maybe a little slower to respond. Maybe your balance is a little bit off. There's multiple different types of concussions that can cause different types of symptoms depending on the person.
And is there anything specific, like age-related, Andy, that we should be on the lookout for? Is it different in what they consider in your world pediatrics, 12 and under, or do we all experience the same brain jarring?
So kids are a little bit more susceptible the younger you are when you have a concussion. I don't want to say the worse your prognosis is, but it can definitely have a more lasting impact on you for longer if you're young and developing. And it's important to not have another concussion while you're still recovering from the first one, especially when you're younger.
Yeah, I want to come back to that point about multiple concussions because, again, we hear a lot about that, especially in football. I'm sure with your several years of playing hockey, you've had experience with that too. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you is when somebody does feel as though they've got a concussion, how long are those symptoms lasting on average?
They can last anywhere from a few days to a month or more, depending on the severity of it. So it's really important to make sure that you get evaluated and make sure you're on the road to recovery. And some people even need other treatments like physical therapy or special kind of therapies to help them along the way.
When you get a concussion and you're experiencing symptoms, why do they tell you don't go to sleep? Like I have hit my head several times. It's terrible to say. There's some things rattling around in there, but they always told me don't fall asleep. Is there a reason behind that?
So that's sort of an old wives' tale kind of thing.
Well, I'm an old wife, so.
You can go to sleep, but it's important, I think, after the initial head injury they want to make sure that you remain conscious. And I think that that's where it actually originated from, to make sure that you don't have other worse types of head injuries that could be like bleeding inside your head, or something like that. That's far beyond a concussion itself, though.
Okay. Okay. And I understand, you've had some additional training that you've taken an interest in. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's through Impact. And can you talk to us a little bit about that? Am I saying that right as an impact?
It is. It's Impact Applications it's sort of a nationwide program, which is really helpful because they have a nationwide database of people who have either had a baseline concussion test, which is a test that you take before you ever have a concussion, and that allows who's ever treating you, once you do have a concussion, to know where you were beforehand, so they can help get you back to where you belong. Um, but it also stores all those records of your repeat tests to make sure that you're progressing properly. And then it allows anyone within that network to be able to access your records. So if you move to California tomorrow, where it's nice and warm and sunny, at least in the South, um, and you pick up with a provider over there, they can access your charts and records and continue your treatment.
I can only imagine how big that would be with kids in travel leagues and multiple coaches. I know some people who they've got, the travel league baseball, they've got the travel soccer, and then they've got the high school soccer, high school baseball. So any of those coaches could access that database that you're referring to, correct?
So the healthcare providers can access it. The coaches don't have access to that. But if you were to be at a travel event out of state, a couple states over, and you were there for multiple days, you could start your treatment there, or have a first injury test there, and then come home, and we could continue that here. So that is super
Okay.
helpful.
Yeah. Okay. How long does that test take and what's it like? What happens during the test?
It's kind of a fun test.
Oh, so
It,
you've taken
it's
it a few times.
Yeah, it's sort of like a game, They have a little traffic light, and you got to push the button when it turns green, and then there's some word tests and things. It's kind of fun, but it takes about an hour to do. It's not a tremendous long time, but it takes you through several different types of modalities, and just tests kind of how you think, your reaction time to things, and your vision, all kinds of cool stuff like that.
Did you guys in the office? Did you guys goof around and see who did best on the test?
We didn't, but that's actually a great idea.
You and I should take it and then tell the audience what I think. They already know what the answer would be of who would be better on. But all right, so let's say you and I go in, we take the test, right? And let's just say I outperform you. Now, that how long are those results in that database?
So they stay in the database, to my knowledge, forever. They eventually might be wiped free when they need space, but they're stored for a good long time. However, as you age, so it's good for an adult to have it, and you kind of know where your base is until you reach different developmental standards. But for kids, you want to take it a little more often, because as kids mature and develop and grow, their baseline also will change over time as well.
That's good to know, and it makes sense, right? As I'm on my decline right now, I should probably, take the test, and then that way you can see how I'm aging, just in case.
I like to think we're at the plateau area right now.
Oh, that's a good way of saying it. Yes. Yes. All right. So it takes about an hour. Do I come see you in the office? How do I get a hold of a test? How does somebody listening to this get a hold of a test?
So there's two ways you can get the test. Ideally, coming into the office allows us to not only give you that computerized test, but there's also some physical tests that we can give you. One is called a VOMS, which involves it's the visual oculomotor, but what it is it involves more eyesight type of things, and moving your head around, and getting a baseline on that. Another one is called a BEST test, that it tests your balance and things. We'll use those tests if you do have a concussion, so it's also good to have a baseline. But the important one is that impact test. You can take that here in the office, or If you're not so inclined, or maybe you're unable to get into the office, I can actually email you a code and you can take that test at home.
That's amazing. I think too, when we were talking, we had a podcast with Cullen Lane, and I know he works with you at Synergy Health Partners Physical Therapy, and he was talking to us about vestibular issues. And I'm wondering, is it smart for somebody to like take the baseline concussion test and then also like a vestibular test? Does that help with, the baseline athletic performance and where you stand as a young athlete?
I think it could for sure. I don't know that the baseline test would help Cullen so much if you're doing his vestibular stuff, but I think having as much data as possible to compare to when we're treating and recovering from a concussion definitely would be helpful.
Okay. And then when I'm recovering, let's say I obviously I have my baseline test with you, and then I do unfortunately get injured. What's the protocol for helping me through the concussion?
Yeah, so that is different based on what we find during your test, and that's what's super helpful for it. There's many different trajectories that a concussion can take in different people. Some people just get headaches, other people get that fogginess, other people have nausea, vomiting, and other things. So depending on what your symptoms are, it really depends on how your treatment goes. Sometimes it's just a matter of rest up for a few days and then we give you the test again and see that you've reached pretty much back to normal. Other times you go see my friend Colleen and do some oculovestibular therapy to help your recovery. And then other times when they're more severe, we have to send you on to special psychiatrists and
Oh, wow.
things like that. But those are the rare cases.
Okay. When you is there such a thing, do you have to hit your head a certain way, or do you have to hit your head hard enough? What actually causes that concussion to happen?
So that's the tricky thing about it is you don't necessarily have to hit your head a certain way or in a certain force. You just have to hit it just right for you on that any given Sunday kind of thing. But usually what causes the concussion is not so much the actual hit to your skull, it's more of a jarring of your brain inside your skull. So anything that shakes and rattles you around too much can do it.
I saw a great video that you have on your webpage on the Synergy Health Partners Orthopedic Urgent Care website, and it talks about concussions. And you did a video, and it does show a great depiction of somebody going back and forth and what the brain actually looks like in someone's head when that concussion happens. It really does give you a real strong visual. So I'm glad you did that. We're hearing so much now about multiple concussions. Is there any baseline for how many concussions are too many concussions? Is it one? Is it 10? Or is it different for everybody?
So that is also a little bit tricky and different for everybody. The dangerous part is if you sustain a concussion before you fully recover from your concussion that you're currently recovering from. So that's the real danger. Obviously, you want to minimize any number of concussions. One is too many technically, but if you haven't fully recovered from your first concussion and you have a second one, that is when it becomes a little bit more chronic and dangerous um, for your future, and your symptoms are worse, and then certain things could become more permanent.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. So we come see you, we get our baseline concussion test. We then, I heard on your webpage, we can also, as a medical provider, you can get into the database from our website or from your website. And do you get like a passcode or something, Andy? How does that work?
You do. Yeah, you're talking about taking a baseline test?
Oh, after I take, if I'm a medical provider and I get approached by someone who's had a concussion and they say, hey, I met this guy, Andy Cox, he gave me this baseline concussion test. The medical provider, do they have a code that they can get into that database?
Yeah, they do. So I have a login for impact applications, and our other PAs here in the urgent care do as well. So if I'm not here this particular day, any of our orthopedic urgent care PAs have this access as well. And we can look up any patient that is in the national database and begin their treatment or give them a secondary test, whatever we need to do. And that is helpful because, like you said, if you get hurt somewhere else and you took a test, we can continue your care. Or if you go somewhere else, another provider can continue your care.
That's amazing. Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Andy, it's been great. Thank you so much. Anything else you've got going on at that urgent care that you're seeing as spring is approaching?
So, I see a lot of foot and ankle injuries,
Oh,
wrist injuries, and lately I've had a string of knees. So people are twisting and doing things. So we're here 7 days a week. So if you have one of those injuries, come and see us and we'll get you on the road to recovery for sure. It
what's
doesn't have to be a concussion.
yeah, what's going on with the knees? Is it soccer injuries? Is it basketball? Obviously, you're with the basketball court and a soccer court right now, but is there a certain sport? Is it male versus female? Is it just everybody?
Seems to be just everybody. I don't have a pulse on what's causing it, but it's mostly people twisting their knees, and then of course I always get a lot of twisted ankles. Some of it's the weather, some of it's the sport, the basketball, and whatnot.
And it sounds like you've got a lot going on and somebody's waiting to see you. I can hear some noise in the background. Thank you for spending the time. Concussion is a very serious topic being talked about by everybody. Good to know that you're available for that baseline test and what's involved. Thank you again for being a part of Head to Total.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.